welcome to our March Think and a Drink. I feel like it's been a while since I've seen everyone, but thank you for joining last month if we did see you then, and it's good to see you today. We're all excited for Stephen Salel, Curator of Japanese Art. He's going to do a discussion on Hokusai in just a little bit, but just a few normal housekeeping rules before we do get started. Looks like everybody is muted, so thank you so much for muting yourselves. And I do want to just let everybody know, remind you folks that this is being recorded. So just being cognizant of that during the presentations. And I'm just going to quickly just introduce Hillary Scholan. I'm sure many of you know her, familiar face from development. And she's just going to talk about a exciting opportunity for participation for one of our upcoming exhibitions. So I'm going to pass it over to her to chat about that for just a second. Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. It said that the host muted me, so I thought you had to unmute me, but I got it. Thanks everyone for letting me join you tonight and just say a few quick words about a very exciting project that we're working on at HOMA. And actually, Catherine, you are on the call. And I was going to talk a little bit about Joyful Return. Did you want to pop on and say anything about the exhibition? Because I don't know if this group has heard much about it. And you might be a better person to frame the whole thing.
I'm happy to, or you can start and I'll fill in the gaps, whatever you're more
okay. How about I do that? I'll talk about a little piece, and I wanted to mention this to this specific group of members because I know you folks are all engaged and you have all had wonderful, joyous experiences at HOMA. But what's going to be happening in April is the Joyful Return exhibition is going to open, and it's a 6 or 7 part exhibition. Catherine can correct me there if I have the number of parts wrong, but it's going to be very engaging and meant to activate the courtyards. And I am here to ask for your guys' specific help. We're collecting photos of people's joyous memories that they've had throughout the years at the museum. And we wanted to see your beautiful faces having fun at the museum. So I think in last week's, it's either last week or the week before, the e-newsletter, there was a request for photos to be sent. And if you have any of those in your possession, you can digitize them and send them to joyfulreturn@honolulumuseum.org. And maybe, I don't know, if Jetty's sending out something soon, I might ask her to include that email in her communications with you, so you'll have it. But if you send any photos you have to that email address, we're going to be incorporating those historical photos into a mural project that's going to be installed behind Penelope. And so that might be a little bit of a teaser. You might have a little bit more information than the public has, because I think we've just told people, hey, give us your fun photos for a fun and exciting project. So we want to see everybody's participation, and we want to see people that we know, all of the familiar faces. And we've already had a lot of submissions start rolling in. Our members and visitors have a great photographic eye, so it's awesome to see everybody's memories there. But yeah, Catherine, did you want to say anything more about the greater exhibition as a whole?
Sure. As Hillary said, this is sort of a sneak peek. I think we've sort of teased it on social media as keep your eyes and ears open for this great, exciting new, it's basically a year-long exhibition project. And Hillary's right, it's in 7 parts. And it's basically 6 outdoor courtyard activation events with local artists and creatives and our entire museum team. We've done these sort of collaborative cross-departmental core teams, and we're doing these installations and activations that will unfold over time outside, so it's sort of safe, but the whole idea is to welcome everybody back now that we have the vaccines rolling out and there's hope on the horizon. It's sort of say welcome back for this kind of joyous return to the museum, and it's really about engaging the community. We have a lot of community sourcing projects, like send in your photos of your best times at HOMA, and we'll put them on this crowdsourced collage behind Penelope, who is a kind of metaphorical classical figure of return and waiting for her husband Odysseus, who was at the Trojan War for 20 years, and she was sort of patiently waiting, and this figure of endurance. So she's in one of the return installations, and they all have this kind of theme. So we have regrow, restore, reflect, return, recover, and it's all about sort of just coming back as a community, celebrating hope for the coming year, and to celebrate local artists and our creative team all across the museum. It's going to be bright, it's going to be colorful, it's going to be thoughtful. We're also doing a great presentation of our 20th century, our greatest 20th century works. That's the one in-gallery installation, the rest is outside. So it unfolds over time across the campus. It's going to be really dynamic. It's sort of a reboot after the isolation of the pandemic, and the whole team is heavily involved and super essential. And I think it's going to be a pretty galvanizing event for the community, we hope. So there you go.
Awesome. So yeah, if anybody has those photos, send them our way. We'd love to see them. Mm-hmm. And thanks for letting us say hi to you guys. And it's great to see all of your faces.
This packaging I got from these two readers. This is Tommy waiting up.
Whoops.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you so much, Hillary. Is there a deadline for the photo submission?
So as Catherine mentioned, it'll be going on for this entire year. So the photo submissions will actually be rolling, and if you send them on, if you find more as the year goes on, just send them to that email, and we'll incorporate that. The mural is going to actually grow over time, and as we get more and more photos, we're hoping that the photos just take over, and we'll have to start covering some up, and it takes on a life of its own. So come and see it. I think that opens April 17th, and you can also do sort of some inception kind of thing where you can take a photo with yourself on the wall by chance, and so anyway, super exciting. Hope to see your faces.
Thank you so much. I put the email in the chat, so if you folks want to jot that down, it'll be there. And I will pass it off to Stephen now to take it away with a pretty exciting Hokusai presentation. So I'm very excited. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Jetty. And thank you, Hillary and Catherine, for all the information about Joyful Return. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Good. Okay. Like any Zoom meeting, this is going to have some technical aspects to it. I'm going to try to show a PowerPoint presentation to you, and then I'm gonna try to come back to you like this and chat. If along the way there are any problems, please speak up and let us know. I'm happy to slow down and repeat myself if necessary. Because of we have about a 30-minute time limit for this, as I've been told. So I'm working from a bit of a script. I'm going to try to move at a fairly quick pace. At the same time, some of you have, I'd like to hear from you during the presentation. So anyways, thank you all for that. So let me just get started here. I imagine that most all of you have met me before. In case we have any newcomers to the group, let me introduce myself. My name is Stephen Salel, and I'm the Curator of Japanese Art at the Honolulu Museum of Art, working under the auspices of the Robert F. Lange Foundation. Today, I'd like to talk with all of you about a strategy to appreciate an ongoing exhibition in the Atsuhiko and Ina Goodwin Tateuchi Thematic Gallery The exhibition, if you haven't seen it yet, is called Hokusai's Mount Fuji, and it focuses upon selections of the 36 views of Mount Fuji, a series of woodblock prints that Katsushika Hokusai produced late in his career. Let me switch now to my PowerPoint. Okay, hope you guys can see that well. Okay, in the announcement for this event, I invited participants to send me 3 kinds of photographs, those showing things that gave us comfort during the past year, images of geographic landmarks in Hawaii, and images of the ocean. These are examples of my own. I've been entertaining myself with my travel guitar. I recently visited the Ho'uma Luhia Botanical Garden, and the view of the Pacific Ocean was taken along the Maili Pillbox hiking trail. Thanks to all of you who submitted photos. We had a wonderful response, and at 3 different points over the course of this presentation, I'll be showing those images. If I mention your photo, and if you are willing and able to introduce the picture, that would be great. All I ask is that in the interest of time, you limit your comments to about 30 seconds or less. If you're not able to talk about your photo, that's fine. I'll introduce it on your behalf. The reason why I asked you to submit these photos will become clear in just a little while. So here's the first set of images. Sources of comfort during the past year of COVID. My apology for the small size of each image, but I wanted to make sure that we included the photos that everybody submitted. Is Patricia with us? Patricia, you're muted. If you could unmute yourself, that would be great.
Mia, my cat, my pet, she became much more a friend. And then down below is Margie, who came to visit for 2 weeks, the last part of February. And because she's from New Jersey and is 90 years old, her family pleaded, could she please stay? And she stayed for 3 months. So here's a picture of us celebrating St. Patrick's Day.
Awesome. Thank you, Patricia. Robert is with us as well, I believe, but I think that he might have difficulty with the microphone, but he asked me to speak on his behalf. He's showing here a glass of whiskey, or as he termed it, COVID comfort. And if you look carefully, you can see reflected in the glass the Honolulu skyline. Thank you, Robert. Fred, would you like to go next?
Hi, so I am a volunteer storyteller at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. I typically work with 2nd and 3rd graders who come on field trips. They get a story and also some art engagement on pieces that I select. Obviously in March, all the field trips are canceled. Then in November, we actually started offering these tours to students learning remotely. And so this is one of my favorite pieces. This rooster is actually about as tall as some of our children. And it goes with the Chinese story, how the rooster got his crown. So we were able to bring kids back into the museum, although virtually.
Thank you, Fred. The next image is from Michelle Morihara. And I believe that Michelle was not ultimately able to join us for today, so I'll speak a little bit on her behalf. She told me that this is a photo of an Ilima in the foreground with Linicona in the background. She said that the flowers bring her joy and happiness with their bright colors, and that, along with the blue sky, softens the architecture of Linicona. So thank you for that, Michelle. Next is a photo from Sharon Twigg Smith. I believe that Sharon is traveling at the moment, so again, she was unable to join us. This is a photo of her piano that she bought recently at the suggestion of her piano teacher. She told me that she's been enjoying jam sessions with other jazz musicians at her home recently. Let's see, Patricia, you've already introduced the photo of your friend. So let me continue on to Maureen's image. Maureen also was unable to join us. So let me explain a bit about this. She was walking through Kapiolani Park the other day after the heavy rains, and she came across this tree. If you look carefully, nestled among the roots of the trees, there are hand-painted stones, and she found this quite charming. She titled the photo "A Child's Musings." Let me continue on to Nancy. Nancy, are you here?
Yep, I'm here. So is my husband, Sal.
Wonderful.
So yes, this is a picture of our front yard, just a portion of our front yard. We moved to this home in the middle of the lockdown last April. And it's just brought me great comfort. Now that when we had to stay home, so I worked outside a lot, and it's got some great plants. Half of them, I don't even know what they are, but I'm, learning. We have a large mango tree in the back, and all sorts of plants that I'm learning about. So this is just a portion of the front yard, and it's an old 1932 Hawaiian craftsman home that's been renovated, thankfully, but we're really enjoying it here. So.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a beautiful garden.
Thank you.
Ellen is also with us, but she asked me to explain this photo of hers for her. She said that jigsaw puzzles have been a favorite pastime during the COVID times, and she wanted me to ask you all if there are any jigsaw puzzle fans among you who she could share puzzles with. So if there are, please let us know at the end of the presentation, and maybe you could exchange some ideas with Ellen. Next and last but not least is Rudy. Rudy?
This is a picture in our yard. We came to Hawaii last March, and 2 days later, the stay-at-home order took effect. So we stayed there for almost 7 months, and now we are back in California, where the stay-at-home order for a long time was much stricter. And so our garden is a great space to be. And this is a picture of our first blooming Cymbidium. Since then, we have about 16 plants blooming, and it's nice to be outdoors and enjoy the garden while we so pretty much are still confined at home.
Thank you, Rudy. They're beautiful flowers, and it's great to see the sort of connections that all of you have with your interests in this way. What I enjoy most about these photographs is that they share a kind of common theme that is the things that brought us comfort during COVID, but at the same time, they show this immense diversity. And if we were to take these images and put them into a photo album, we could organize them in a way that emphasizes some sub-themes. For example, on the far left, we have Michelle's, Nancy's, and Rudy's botanical imagery. And on the next page, we have painted works shown by Fred and Noreen. On the left page of the right book, we have Robert and Sharon displaying things that offer us comfort in both visual and non-visual ways. And on the far right, Patricia and Ellen remind us about the joys of companionship. You were probably wondering when I was going to finally start talking about Hokusai. Hokusai was active in the early 1800s, decades before the introduction of photography to Japan. So he relied upon sketches. The images that we find in his sketchbooks are equally diverse and are categorized in much the same way. Like Michelle, Nancy, and Rudy, he was keenly interested in flowers. Like Patricia and Ellen, he portrayed his friends, and that would include his furry friends. He lived in a big city, and he was fascinated by the architecture that surrounded him. And of course, he was equally interested in landscapes. These particular vistas are difficult for us to identify. And while that may be because we live in another country and another era, I think it's also because they were not particularly famous geographic landmarks. And what do I mean by such a landmark? Well, that leads us to our second set of photographs, geographic landmarks on Oahu. Let's introduce these as well. I will speak for Robert here to introduce the first one. Robert says this is the Blaisdell Center and the Honolulu skyline at dusk. Next is an image by Bob. Bob, could you do the honors?
This is a photograph taken from our window in Waikiki, and it's always very comforting to look out there and see Diamond Head. And it occurred to me it was appropriate for this particular evening because in some respects, I would argue that Diamond Head or Leahi is the Hawaiian equivalent of Mount Fuji. It has, you know, I'm sure I'm not the first person to make that connection, but it just seemed to be appropriate for this particular evening.
I totally agree. And I like the sort of transnational, transcultural way in which we elevate a particular mountain or a geographic site as such an icon in each of our societies. Very good point, Bob. The next image is from Sharon, and Sharon told me about this image. It's the National Memorial of the Pacific, otherwise known as Punch Bowl, which she sees from the side of from one side of the building where she lives. Let's see. Next is a photograph from Ellen. Ellen asked me to say about this. It The Biodoing Temple in Hawaii is one of the most beautiful landmarks on the island, set against the Ko'olau Mountains. To her, it's a celebration of the arrival of Japanese immigrants to Hawaii, and she loves the grounds and their peacefulness there. The next image, also by Ellen, depicts Kaneohebe, and she says it's got to be one of the most beautiful places in the world. This is the view that she and her husband have enjoyed for 30 years while living in Ka'alu. Sorry, my Hawaiian pronunciation is pretty shameful even after living here for 9.5 years, but I'm still working on it. Michelle's photographed is next. She told me that Diamond Head is shown in the background of this landscape from Spalding House. And she said this photograph reminds her of Hokusai's prints and the various views he displayed of Mount Fuji in the distance. She said, we often see photos of Diamond Head with a stretch of Waikiki Beach in the foreground or looking up at Diamond Head from Kapiolani Park. So this photo is a little bit different in that way. In Japanese art, there's an entire genre dedicated to geographic and cultural landmarks, and Hokusai spent much of his career depicting those places for various reasons that I discuss in the exhibition at the museum. The most famous and revered of those landmarks was Mount Fuji. And in 2 prints from the series, including this image, we see the volcano by itself. What I'd like to emphasize here as a kind of overarching theme for the 36 views of Mount Fuji is the way in which Hokusai combined the image of this geographic landmark with intimate personal pictures, similar to those he recorded in his sketchbooks. So what we're going to do here is make our own woodblock print series. Perhaps we could call it something like the 12 Views of Oahu, in which we simulate Hokusai's strategy, combining the delicate and the monumental. So here on the left, we have the flowers from Michelle's garden, superimposed against Ellen's view of Biodoing Temple. And on the right, we see Chen Dayu's painting of the crowing rooster and green prunus, selected by Fred. And we see it beside Ellen's photo of Kaneohebe. Of course, there is a major difference between what we're doing here and what Hokusai did. Hokusai was able to integrate the personal and the monumental into a relatively seamless 3-dimensional space, while we're inserting Michelle's flowers and Fred's painting as vignettes. Nevertheless, as viewers, we're experiencing a similar emotional reaction to what Hokusai intended. I suppose you could say that those 2 emotions are grandeur and familiarity, sort of like the beginning of William Blake's poem, August Trees of Innocence. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. We can combine the photos you submitted to me in a variety of different ways. I'm only showing one possible set of combinations, and I'm sure there are other juxtapositions that might be even better, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to demonstrate here. On the left, Ellen enjoying a puzzle alongside Robert's view of the Blaisdell Center. And on the right, Rudy's flowers together with Bob's view of Diamond Head. On the left, Sharon's piano besides Michelle's view of Diamond Head from the lawn of Spalding House. And on the right, Nancy's garden together with Sharon's view of Punch Bowl. Returning to the work of Hokusai, in the upper left, I'm showing once again the sketchbook in which he's drawn several kinds of flowers. And on the right, he has essentially incorporated one of those flowers into a landscape with Mount Fuji far off in the distance. Another set of sketches by Hokusai that we considered were lesser known landscape scenes. And here he's placed one of those views, that of the lake at Hakone, in front of Mount Fuji. And here are some other examples of that same combination. Taking a lesser known landscape with some figures traversing through it and placing it in the foreground with Mount Fuji off in the background. As I mentioned, Hokusai was very interested in the architecture of Edo City. In his Fuji series, he includes the roof of Honganji Temple in Asakusa District, the Mannen Bridge in Fukugawa District, the Torii Gate at Noboto Bay, and the roof of the Mitsui department stores in Suruga District. He even depicts images of what I would describe as temporary architecture, a large piece of lumber that is being divided into slats by a group of carpenters, and literal mountains of those pieces being stored at a lumber yard along the waterfront. Hokusai devoted numerous pages in his sketchbooks to birds, and here he's placed them in the foreground. And as Fred and Patricia demonstrated in their photos, animals are an infinite source of comfort. So here, Hokusai spotlights a muster of storks, both grazing in the foreground and flying back towards the volcano. And as Ellen depicts in her photo, we humans do make fascinating models, if I may say so myself. So it's not surprising that the most frequent subject in Hokusai sketchbooks are people. And it's not surprising that they populate the center stage in many prints in his Fuji series. Okay, we're now in the home stretch of this evening's presentation. If you see where I'm leading with this, please don't give away any spoilers. Since we're island dwellers, the ocean plays a very important part in our lives. And in addition to a source of comfort and a geographical landmark, I welcomed you all to submit photos of the ocean. Here are a few. In the upper left was Robert's submission. He says of this photo, "This is rain on the ocean, shot from underwater looking up at the surface. He shot it at Pupukea on the North Shore on Oahu. The next image is from Paul. Paul, are you available to introduce it?
Hi. This is from the Kauai Sheraton at Poipu. There's a walkway alongside the ocean front. And, the scene is beautiful in and of itself, but what it is, it's just one of those moments, that there's, you just feel the waves and the breeze. And it's been just a great comfort, just to look at that picture and to see, just to kind of feel what that moment was. So that has been a great comfort to me. So.
Thank you, Paul. The next image is from Susan. Susan, would you like to introduce it?
Sure. This is Kailua Beach. It's one of probably hundreds of photos that I've taken just before sunrise. Once we were legally able to beach walk, we were there every morning for about 45 minutes, and it is extraordinarily peaceful, reflective, and always gave me a great deal of comfort as well, knowing the sun was still coming up every day.
Very well put. Thank you, Susan. The last image is from Sharon Twigg-Smith. Sharon says, this is a little boat harbor where you can rent a fishing boat. Beyond the boats, you can see the surfers who favor that spot every morning just off the jetty. Again, if I may, I'd like to juxtapose these seascapes with our photos of geographic landmarks to demonstrate the way that such a combination provokes within us emotions that might conflict with or complement one another. Susan's beach scene with a botanical garden that I photographed, and on the right, Ellen's seascape alongside Sharon's view of that harbor. Here also Robert's image of the rain coming down on the surface of the water alongside Ellen's image of Biodoing Temple, and on the right, Paul's sunset alongside the image of Diamond Head submitted by Bob. On the left, Paul's sunset alongside Michelle's image of Diamond Head seen from Spalding House, and on the right, Susan's image of the sunset off the shore alongside Sharon's image of out her window. So a surprising number of prints in Hokusai's Fuji series are likewise seascapes, and many of them depict fishermen or sea merchants. Some depict ferries that are transporting passengers across Edo City's network of rivers. And then there's the Great Wave off the coast of Kanagawa, arguably the most famous image in the history of Japanese art, which we showed here at the Honolulu Museum of Art around Thanksgiving of last year. I've spoken about this work at length before, so I'll refrain from doing so right now, especially since our time is about up. But let me just say that the formal device that Hokusai uses here to make this such a powerful image is the same device that we've been discussing this entire time, juxtaposing two relatively unrelated images and discovering between them a new relationship, complete with a wealth of emotions and mental associations. This completes my presentation. I hope you all enjoyed it. And let me pass the reins back to Jetty at this time. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Oh, Bob even has the little clap emoji. That's next level of Zoom technology. I love that. Thank you so much for that great presentation. I love how you interwove all the photos of our island. It's really nice to see that, and a lot of people sent in really wonderful photos. So that was really great. I am just going to open it up to Q&A right now. If people have any questions for Stephen, we can go ahead and open the floor up for that at this time. Yeah, I think Fred is raising his hand.
Stephen, did the artist approach any systematic color scheme for Mount Fuji? You know, they come in different colors, and I'm wondering if say it's blue, does it mean it's dusk? Or if it's brown, does it mean it's summer? Is there any system that he used when he was coloring Mount Fuji?
Thank you, Fred. That's an interesting question. Let me start off by talking about what I can say with confidence, and then move on to other recent interpretations by scholars. You probably noticed that the last two prints that I showed from the series were mostly monochromatic. They were done with what we call in English Prussian Blue. And this was a synthetic dye that, as the name implies, was originally formulated in Prussia during the, I believe it was the late 1820s, and was let's see, ferrocyanide, I believe, is the compound. It was discovered by a chemist who was interested in using it for a completely different purpose, but realized that it was such a brilliant color, and that as a chemical dye, I mean, as a synthetic dye, it was so durable. In other words, it didn't fade under ultraviolet light. He realized that it could be marketed as a textile dye. And so in the following years, it was exported internationally. It entered Japan, I believe, sometime around the early 1830s. And you'll see in a year or a few years preceding Hokusai's series here, there are some designers such as Keisai Eisen who use the color quite a bit in their prints. For several years there was a kind of fad where print designers were cranking out prints in this particular color. And after a while, like all fads do, it lost its popularity and people went back to working polychromatically. To address your question a little bit more specifically, we don't have really concrete information about what Hokusai intended with the colors, but in a recent exhibition that the British Museum did about Hokusai, I believe that the exhibition was entitled Beyond the Great Wave. Tim Clark, the curator there, talked about the idea that the series can be ordered in a sequence that corresponds to a 24-hour period, or maybe a 12-hour period. In other words, the earliest works in the series show the area around Edo City and Mount Fuji at dawn. And because of the light conditions at that time of day, it is fairly monochromatic. And so in those prints, including with the Great Wave Off Kanagawa, he uses a great deal of Prussian blue. As the day progresses and the sun rises in the sky, we see Hokusai using a much wider spectrum. And then towards the end of the day, we see elongated shadows and again, a narrow spectrum of colors. I am not sure how much we can rely upon that interpretation, but if you have an opportunity to check out Tim Clark's catalog, it's a very interesting read. He's a great scholar. That's about all I can say about that. I hope that answers your question. Anybody else? Let's start with Bob. I believe your hand was up first.
It was up. When I look at the whole series, it seems to me that Hokusai was a good marketing man, because he talks about 36 views, actually there are 46, I think, of Mount Fuji. But in many of them, Mount Fuji is at best a bit player. If you could take Mount Fuji out and you'd still have a pretty good player, a pretty good print. So I'm just wondering if he consciously was trying to sell them by trying to put Mount Fuji in all of these, even though it didn't need to be there.
Thank you, Bob. Great question. There are a few things you mentioned there that I wanted to address. And first of all, you're correct. There are 46 images in the series. Apparently, the original plan was, of course, to only produce 36 images, but because the series was so darn popular, Hokusai decided to keep on producing them. As you said, Hokusai, and for that matter, most of the ukiyo-e print designers were good at marketing, or maybe I should say they were thinking of the commercial aspect of their artwork. And that differentiates them, I think, a great deal from many painters in Japan during that time, who would focus on a singular work and were mostly just interested in pleasing their patron. But because Japanese prints were produced en masse and commercially available. And because these designers were competing with one another, then the only designers who could really survive were those who had a good marketing sense. But to address your question, to the extent that I looked into the life of Hokusai, I believe that he was a rather devout Buddhist, and that he held very strong religious beliefs that included the view of Mount Fuji as something like Mount Meru, the Buddhist site and home of the immortals in Taoist theology, or at least religious Taoist theology. I think that he really did produce this series in the attempt to as a way of honoring this sacred site. But you point out something very important, that in many of the prints, Mount Fuji is, like you said, a bit player. And so he's obviously not trying to focus exclusively on the volcano. And I've spent quite a while trying to think about what he is trying to do. And my conclusion, and this is just my personal opinion, but as I've discussed in this presentation here, there are two different levels to 44 prints in the series. If you take out the two prints that focus specifically on Mount Fuji, the other prints have what I was saying, what I was calling the intimate, the personal in the foreground, and Mount Fuji in the background. And I think that he was talking about the connection between those two, and how I think one scholar referred to it this way: Mount Fuji is this ever-present spiritual force in the lives of the people of Eastern Japan, and that, like a protective deity, it's looking over these scenes of daily life, of carpenters who are cutting wood into smaller pieces, or of fishermen traveling through the waters, and looking over them and protecting them. And I like that interpretation a lot. Again, we're casting our fishing lines, I suppose you could say, hoping that we're making an accurate interpretation of these images. But I think that might explain the reason why Mount Fuji is both the primary subject of this series and also, as you said, a bit player in many of the images. Let me move on to Jeannie, if I could. I believe she had her hands up.
Yep, I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just saw the most interesting program on Dokuga on television last week, and it was a photographer who circumnavigated Mount Fuji, completely going around, taking the views of Mount Fuji from where we normally look to the east. Well, then it from the east, I mean, they did it from, and it's so funny because like sunrises and sunsets were in reverse. And I don't know if you can make an arrangement if there are enough actual prints within Hokusai's collection to do that, to do it in 360. And it was interesting. They went to the little town where there's special waters that come from Mount Fuji. They went around to different lake that comes around on the other side and different things and different views. I've never seen his work displayed that way. But this was by a photographer, and he wasn't trying to emulate Hokusai, but he was just saying there's another way to look at Mount Fuji. And I don't know if they've ever had an exhibition of Hokusai's work done in that order.
Right. Thank you, Jeannie. I believe that there have been some exhibitions of this series by Hokusai at the museum in the past, where they incorporated a three-dimensional model of Mount Fuji somewhere in the exhibition. This was before my time at the museum, so I don't know exactly when and how they did it, but I love the idea, like you said, of arranging the prints in a way that reflects their geographic orientation, and maybe shows a new aspect to this series. Right.
It was.
I think you're muted, Jeannie.
There, now I want to go do this because this, how many 100 times I've climbed it, I've done everything, but now I want to go see the backside. In other words, it's not the backside; it's pretty on that side too. But it would be interesting to go do.
Definitely. What you said brings to mind, you know how I said that these views of Mount Fuji are part of a popular genre in Japanese art about depictions of famous sites. And regarding the prints by Hiroshige of the 100 famous sites of Edo, you may remember a few years ago we did an exhibition regarding that series. And around that time, I got a chance to visit Tokyo, and it was my goal to search around and find those particular sites and find where it was that he depicted the landscape from. There was a scholar who actually found the GPS coordinates for all of those 100 locations. And so I went and found a few. I gave up after a very short time, and I'll tell you why. The city of Tokyo is so urbanized and over urbanized that you arrive at this site that is supposedly looking over this incredible landscape, and you're in a parking lot and you're looking at a brick wall, and it was so disheartening to see that I finally decided that this was not a project that deserved a lot of time and energy, and that I would instead focus on enjoying the scenes that Hiroshige was able to immortalize in his prints.
Well, what's so amazing is that there's no river from Fuji, but there's these springs that well up this water, and it's supposed to, I mean, this one place, I mean, it's like gold to have a bowl of soup from them, because people sign up for years to be served the soup, and because it's supposed to have good qualities to it and things. But it was, and like you say, they were in a town, and you know how you showed the roofs, that's a slice of the roof with Fuji behind, that they were able to do the same thing again with this. Oh, it was fascinating. I want to see it again.
Oh, that sounds cool. If you have information about that program, please let me know. I'd be interested in seeing it.
It's called Dokoga, and it's on once a week. I think it's on Sundays on television, but I'll check it up.
Okay.
As I say, I did copy it, and so I'll look for it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you again for a very interesting presentation.
You're very welcome. Patricia?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you very much for making your scholarly information accessible to a neophyte like myself. I've gone to see the prints a couple of times, and I'm fascinated, but the way you presented it and had it be like a personal connection with me, with his work, makes it I'm going to go back again, and I know I'll have a different experience. So the way you presented everything, it was very fascinating, delightful, actually. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Patricia. Well, I believe that the credit, I should pass that on to Jetty and Qingjian and those who are organizing these Think and a Drink events, because that, I think, is really the goal of these events, to take some artwork and demystify it by having a personal conversation about it, and a conversation in which the focus is not necessarily the artwork, but which includes yourselves and either photos or experiences or stories that you have to offer. I think that any great artwork should be able to touch us in a personal way like that. And so I think that, we're simply trying to help the artist do his or her job. And so anyways, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. You're very welcome.
Do we have any other final questions? All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up there. And thank you again to everyone for joining, for participating. Yay, we can do a little applause. And thank you again to Stephen for, of course, that very in-depth and accessible and interesting talk on Hokusai. And
if I may, I'd just like to say a quick thank you to the Robert F. Lange Foundation for their support in our museum's collection and care and display of these prints. It's very much appreciated.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And okay, I think we will wrap this up here. And just to let you folks know, we are trying our best to, since we have the recordings, to put them up after the fact on our YouTube channel. So if you folks are ever interested in rewatching this presentation, please visit the Honolulu Museum of Art YouTube channel, and you can take a look at this one and then maybe past ones that you've missed, or future ones as well. So those are always accessible if you are interested in, or if you feel like you want to share these with friends or other colleagues that you think would benefit. But I think that is where we will wrap it up, and just want to thank everybody and hope you have a good night, and we'll see you next month. Take care.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye.